Ever wonder if financial intrigue and personal machinations can bring down an entire corporation? Episode 20 reveals the mystery. Are you ready to find out? Early in the morning, James sat in his office, his face tense, yet his eyes full of determination. He called Tuan, his voice resolute. I need you to find me a lawyer who can handle the hydropower contract issue with John. Without waiting for Tuan's reply, James hung up, quickly scribbled a few notes on a notepad, and left the office, leaving behind the figures that had been shaking the entire company. James parked at a roadside flower shop. He selected a bouquet of red roses and added a small gift box containing a hand-embroidered handkerchief and some pieces of chocolate that Diep used to love. Even though he knew Diep wasn't materialistic, James believed that thoughtfulness was an essential part of love. He arrived at Diep's house to find the door closed and the yard empty, with no one at home. Noticing a few withered plants and a flock of chickens rummaging around the coop, James didn't hesitate. Rolling up his sleeves, he watered each garden bed, lugged water buckets while thinking of Diep, scattered some feed for the chickens, and then grabbed a broom to sweep up the leaves in the yard. Suddenly he received a call to meet with lawyer Ha. In a hurry, he left the house, leaving behind the bouquet, the gift box, and a short handwritten note. I may be a little later than you, but my love is never late. Then he drove off to meet the lawyer. That afternoon, at the familiar wooden cafe, James met with lawyer Ha. After a few greetings, he spread out all the documents related to the hydropower project on the table. Contracts, emails, and commitment minutes. He stated plainly, John breached the contract. As a result, hundreds of workers lost their wages, and the company suffered losses of tens of billions. I want to sue, and I want to win. My company is on the brink, James added, his tone calm yet heavy with fatigue. I need you to win this case for me. A fee of 200 million, and I'll advance 50 million up front. Lawyer Ha looked steadily at James, then pushed back the envelope containing the money and said softly but firmly, I don't need an advance. I'm taking this case not for the money, but because you're carrying the rights of hundreds of poor people on your shoulders. James fell silent for a moment before nodding, a surge of gratitude rising within him. Amid the financial storm, at least he still had people ready to stand by him, not for profit, but because of their shared trust. And that, he knew, would help him stand firm, even though the future was still filled with challenges yet to be solved. At daybreak, as dawn's light barely crept over the horizon, Diep quietly slung her basket over her shoulder and walked along the dusty road leading to the field. Every step was a habit, a part of a life she had never abandoned. The green gourds spread out under the early mist, their leaves cool and their ripe, heavy fruits just waiting to be picked. Despite life's uncertainties and the lingering pains of her heart, she remained rooted to the earth, clinging to the trees, as if that were the very essence of a normal life. Sitting in the middle of the field, her hands busy with the harvest, she paused occasionally to wipe the sweat from her brow with the sleeve of her shirt, her distant gaze hinting at unspeakable burdens. When she finished, she carried her basket down to the local market. There she arranged the gourds in a small corner by the roadside and hung a handwritten sign, Clean Gourds /KG. She didn't shout or call out to passers-by, she just sat quietly, smiling whenever someone stopped by. Then, a familiar figure approached. Uncle Kien. He didn't greet her immediately, but stood silently for a moment before speaking in a husky voice. Still the same, still living your quiet life, but I have to tell you, you should stay away from that James. Diep looked up at him, taken aback. Why, sir? Uncle Kien glanced down at the pile of gourds and replied indirectly, sometimes, even good people can go astray if they get too deep into a world that isn't meant for them. I know you trust him, but sometimes pulling back is the only way to keep yourself safe. With that, he walked away, leaving an ambiguous silence in Diep's mind. She didn't fully understand, but an unease suddenly settled in her heart. A little later, a familiar voice of song drifted through the market. Min, the wandering singer she had met before, was approaching. He carried a radiant air, yet his eyes still held a trace of sorrow. Sitting down beside Diep, he noticed a carefully wrapped red gift box. Is that a Valentine's present? James gave it to you, right? Diep nodded slightly. Min fell silent for a few seconds before confessing, yesterday, I called my brother. I agreed to come home and take over the company." Diep was stunned. Min looked at her, his eyes so sincere they nearly choked him. "I once thought that just wandering and singing was enough. But it turns out that without a solid foundation and responsibility, you can't hold on to anything. I'm coming back, not because of family pressure, but because I want to stand by you. Not just as a passerby." Diep lowered her head, her heart heavy with conflicting emotions. Amid the men who came and went, endless, unending advice and vague worries, she wasn't sure who to trust or which path was right. But one thing was clear, her heart still leaned toward one person, even though that person was gradually becoming shrouded in unanswered questions. Early in the morning, the atmosphere at the CI company campus was in an unusual state of chaos. Dozens of workers had gathered, tightly packed at the entrance, each with faces marked by exhaustion and tension. Some were angry, some had little children in tow, and others clutched protest petitions and unpaid water bills. After 3 months without a paycheck, they could wait no longer. An older worker spoke up, his voice choked with frustration. "We don't want to make a fuss, but 3 months without pay, and now they're cutting off our water. How are we supposed to live?" Murmurs began to spread, and another worker added, "If nothing is done, we'll go to the media." At that moment, a car pulled up at the company gate. James stepped out, his shirt still wrinkled and his face haggard from many sleepless nights. He looked around at the crowd, unflinching and direct, then walked purposefully forward, raising his hand to signal everyone to remain calm. "Ladies and gentlemen, I know you're upset, and I completely understand," James announced loudly, his voice clear and steady. "Our hydropower project was abruptly halted because the investor pulled out, and our company is facing severe difficulties. But I promise, within the next 3 days, all outstanding wages will be paid. If I fail to do so, I will take personal responsibility before the law." The tense atmosphere gradually calmed. The skeptical looks slowly turned to silence. Some sighed, others nodded slightly, but no one opposed him further. James bowed his head in gratitude, then returned inside the company as the iron gate closed behind him, symbolically separating the crisis from the burden borne by him. Inside, he headed straight to the meeting room where his younger brother, the deputy director, was waiting. Without any lengthy greetings, James sat down and said hurriedly, "The situation is even worse now. I need your help immediately." After listening silently to James's presentation, his brother asked, "What's the plan?" James looked him straight in the eye and replied, "Let the news be that I've been hospitalized on the brink of death. That way John will think I'm weak and in disarray. He'll be forced to reveal himself soon enough." His brother hesitated slightly. A fake news story might backfire easily. James only smiled faintly, his eyes tired yet resolute. "We have no other choice. If we don't hit him psychologically, he'll continue hiding and the company will slowly die." In that meeting room, the discussion wasn't about contracts or strategy anymore. It was a fight for survival. And James, burdened with responsibility, had chosen the riskiest path possible: to save everything. Early in the morning, Diep hurried toward town, scarf on and jacket fastened. She hadn't slept a wink all night. Her heart had been pounding with worry after hearing the rumor that James had been hospitalized. Without a moment's hesitation, she went straight to the woodwork shop to find Tuan, hoping for a clear explanation. Spotting him checking materials, she rushed over and asked in an urgent tone, "Tuan, do you know what happened to James? They say he's been admitted to the hospital." Tuan looked startled, but didn't try to hide the truth. "He's in room 7 at the town hospital. I don't know all the details, but I've heard he's in a weakened state. You should go check on him." Not wasting another second, Diep dashed off like the wind, her heart racing with worry. Arriving at the hospital, she hesitantly pushed open a door and found James lying motionless on the bed, his face pale as a sheet. She stepped closer, gently sitting at the edge of his bed, her eyes red. "You never tell me anything," she whispered, as she softly grasped his cold hand. James kept his eyes closed, silent as if in a deep sleep. After a while, Diep quietly left, her heart heavy with sorrow. Soon after, the door opened again. This time, it was John, the very man who had once pushed CI into a dead end. He strode in without any pleasantries and pulled up a chair next to James. "You're pretty good at faking illness," he sneered. But sooner or later you'll collapse anyway. I've pulled out my investment. The workers are revolting, and even the lawyers can't help. Everything you've built, I'll tear down piece by piece." He smirked as he pulled out an unlit cigarette from his pocket, gestured victoriously, and then got up and left, unaware that, behind the wall clock, a tiny camera had recorded the entire conversation. At that very moment, Diep turned around carrying a bag of hot congee. She placed a bowl on the table and, as she looked up, she saw James, sitting up, winking playfully. She froze for a few seconds before exclaiming, "You! Are you okay? Have you been awake all this time? So you were faking it after all?" Before James could answer, Diep playfully picked up a pillow and tossed it at him, scolding, "You scared me to death. I thought your feigned illness was just a joke." Yet, even as she scolded him, her hand still grabbed the congee, blowing it cool before handing it over for him to eat. James smiled softly, accepting the spoonful of steaming congee, his eyes gentler than ever. Diep wasn't truly angry. She was just relieved he was okay. And more than anything, in that risky trick of his, James had trusted her enough to share his most important plan. After his fake illness was exposed, and after receiving a loving, pillow-throwing scolding from Diep, James was forgiven more easily than he'd expected. Diep no longer felt anger. Her eyes shone with gentle concern, and her cheeks were flushed with all the worry accumulated over the past days. After finishing the bowl of hot congee, James slipped on his jacket and stood up, saying to her, "Let's go. I want to take you home." Before Diep could respond, James scooped her up on his back, just as he had done every time she sulked. On the way back, as the cool breeze swept through the trees, Diep laughed and lightly tapped his shoulder. "So, now that you're done faking illness, are you faking being a good guy?" James chuckled softly, his deep, warm voice replying, "No faking at all. Today this good guy is going to tell you everything honestly." Once they arrived at her place, James gently set Diep down on the doorstep. They sat together on the porch, where the scent of wild grass mingled with the lingering aroma of morning tea. After a moment of quiet reflection, James began to explain. The hydropower project was originally valued at 10 billion, but after John pulled out his investment, not only did the company drop 5 billion into the red, but we also have to shoulder an extra 3 billion in unpaid wages for the workers. If we can't come up with 8 billion in the next few days, everything will collapse. Diep was stunned. She had suspected the situation was dire, but not to this extent. She looked at James and saw in his eyes not only the exhaustion he'd been hiding, but also a determination to never give in. He continued, "I know that you and Tuan have some funds from the woodwork shop and construction. If you can lend me that money, I'll use it as our final leverage. I promise I'll repay every cent. If not, I'll shoulder all the responsibility myself." Diep didn't answer right away. She just sat there, looking at him for a long moment before gently resting her head on his shoulder. "I trust you, but this time you can't hide anything from me." James nodded softly, squeezing her hand. In his eyes there was a hint of relief after months of facing adversity alone. As he prepared to leave, James looked back at Diep one last time, his eyes heavy with worry. He knew the danger was far from over, especially with John silently tracking his every move. Before getting into the car, he whispered, "I'll call when I get to the destination, and if anything happens, remember, never open the door for strangers." Diep didn't reply. She just nodded slightly. Yet inside, an indescribable sense of unease began to stir.
Mình yêu siêu Yang, nhưng liệu họ có còn cơ hội yêu nhau không? Dưới bầu trời xám xịt của một buổi sáng mùa đông, vùng nông thôn Việt Nam chìm trong cái lạnh buốt thấu xương. Những cơn gió heo mây thổi qua cánh đồng mang theo hơi thở của đất trời, và tất cả những nỗi niềm chưa thể nói thành lời của Tử Diệp. Sau ngày cô từ chối tình cảm của Giam, người đàn ông đã kéo cô ra khỏi bóng tối quá khứ. Trái tim cô rơi vào những khoảng trống không tên, như khi ánh sáng ban mai đè nhẹ rọi xuống. Một sự thật dần hé lộ trong cô. Cô yêu anh dù nỗi tự ti vẫn như một sợi dây vô hình trói chặt cô lại. Liệu tình yêu ấy có đủ sức vượt qua những rào cản của số phận, hay chỉ là một giấc mơ ngắn ngủi tan biến giữa thực tại khắc nghiệt? Hành trình trong tập